Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Warning Track. Brett Quintyne here at the Sports Studios here in New York City, and for the next hour, we are going to concentrate on baseball. Yes, folks, it's that time of year again. It seemed like just yesterday that the Rangers were losing to the San Francisco Giants, but 5 months later, here we are into spring training. A matter of fact, the first spring training game is today out in Scottsdale, Arizona. The Giants and Diamondbacks are getting it on, but I know, folks, you're really interested in the real season, the regular season, and that will begin in about a month, and we here at Sports, we're very excited to bring it to you. Over the course of this season, we plan on having players, we plan on having coaches, we plan on having some executives to break it all down. We want to give you baseball and other sports in depth as much as we can. And if we're going to talk in depth, well, let's get right to it, folks. As when last we saw baseball, it was the Giants and the Rangers in the World Series. But how about one of the other teams that made baseball's Final Four? That was the Philadelphia Phillies. They made a splash in the offseason with the acquisition of Cliff Lee. He was a dominant lefty. He helped dominate the Texas Rangers all the way through the American League playoffs into the World Series. But you know what? Cliff Lee is now a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. And a lot of people, they're ready to give the Phillies the World Series crown right now. But you know what? Not so fast. There's 29 other teams that want to claim the prize. But let's talk about pitching, because pitching indeed is what brings teams championships. The Phillies, they have a couple of Roys: Roy Halladay, Roy Oswalt, Cole Hamels, and of course, Cliff Lee. We can even throw in the fifth starter, Joe Blanton. He's no slouch at all. So when you think about the Philadelphia Phillies, that's the first thing that comes to mind, because the biggest thing over the course of 162 games, they're going to be in every ball game. Halladay, who of course won the Cy Young Award last year, dominant pitcher, so dominant he was able to throw a no-hitter in the playoffs, something we hadn't seen since Don Larson doing it in the World Series. You talk about a guy named Roy Oswalt. Oswalt, he, year in, year out, eats up a lot of innings. He had some good seasons with the Astros, but now he's in the city of brotherly love. You pair those two guys along with the lefties. Cole Hamels, he certainly has shown what he can do. And Cliff Lee, he's a guy who it seems like he wouldn't move around so much. Started his career off with the Cleveland Indians. Then next thing you know, he is with the Seattle Mariners and then the Texas Rangers and now the Phillies. He said the right things in the offseason. He feels very comfortable in that Philly rotation. And I think the one thing that is going to help all of those Philly pitchers, they don't have to be the guy. That's arguably 4 aces on one staff. So if one guy doesn't do it one night, the next guy will do it the next night. So they can rely on one another. You move on to the offense. You have obviously Ryan Howard, Jimmy Rollins, and of course Chase Utley. But while we're talking about this, I'd like some participation from you guys. 347-480-1724 is your number to join Warning Track. That's 347-480-1724. But yes, again, back to the Phillies. They are a solid team. Jason Worth, he's no longer with the Phillies. He was very productive. He now is with the Washington Nationals. So in a sense, they've got a void to fill. They have a rookie named Dominic Brown who might step in. We'll see. That's what spring training is for. It's a tryout for the non-veterans. Again, 347-480-1724 to join us on the Warning Track. Well, the Philly season came to an end last year at the hands of the world champion San Francisco Giants. This is a baseball team that very quietly snuck through the regular season. They hung around all year. It was the San Diego Padres who seemingly were in cruise control for the entire season. But then September rolled around, the Giants and Padres switched places. It was the Giants who took over first place, and they never looked back. They played the best baseball that they possibly could have in the final 2 months of the season, and that truly is where you win a pennant, and that, of course, was September and October. You look at the Giants, they're really a no-name team. They don't have a lot of household names. There's one star pitcher, of course, Tim Lincecum, but he is undoubtedly the ace of that staff. Tim Lincecum, he may be small in stature, but he's very dominant on the mound. Lincecum, clearly the dominant starter for the San Francisco Giants. But they also made some other offensive moves, and actually will stay with the pitching staff. Matt Cain, bet you didn't realize he is the longest tenured San Francisco Giant who's currently on the squad. Cain comes to pitch day in and day out. He, of course, will be a star in that rotation as well. Jonathan Sanchez, this is a guy who has a no-hitter to his credit. And, of course, the often overlooked Barry Zito. Barry Zito, clearly a veteran on that staff. Matter of fact, when he switched teams, he probably didn't even have to move. He goes across the bay from Oakland to San Francisco. He hasn't been a star with the Giants. Matter of fact, some guys might even say he's been a touch of a disappointment. But when you mix those four together, at least on paper, it doesn't seem like they are contenders. I shouldn't say they're not contenders, but it doesn't seem like they're dominant at all. But they pitch at the right time, and they did what they needed to do, and they got some outstanding performances last year in the postseason. But how about some of the guys on offense? Rookie of the Year, Buster Posey behind the plate. Buster Posey, obviously, offensively, very solid, but he calls a great game. And when you have a standout catcher, that makes your pitchers that much better. Miguel Tejada, he's a brand new San Francisco Giant. He's a guy who has plenty of experience. He's a veteran. He spent time with the Padres last year, of course. He's been in many postseasons with the Oakland Athletics. He'll take over the shortstop role. Nice double play combination. You have Miguel Tejada and Freddie Sanchez. 347-480-1724 to join us on Warning Track. You have a nice middle of the infield for the San Francisco Giants. And then what about the Panda? A lot of people said that he had a disappointing year last season, which he did if you compare it to 2009. But Pablo Sandoval definitely is a key cog in that San Francisco Giants offense. And very quietly, I can't say they're going to repeat immediately, very quietly they are going to be in the thick of things because, as we've seen, the National League West is very topsy-turvy. The Dodgers have contended. We've seen the Diamondbacks a few years play well. The Padres, of course, had a solid season, but they lost a big name in Adrian Gonzalez. We'll talk about some of those teams a little bit later on in the show, but initially, the San Francisco Giants, very stable. A team over in the American League that may not be so stable, that I personally think will have a tougher time repeating, not only as league champs, but maybe even getting out of the division. That's the Texas Rangers. First off, Adrian Beltre, big acquisition. He signed a huge 6-year deal. He's hurt for a couple of weeks, and yes, it is spring training, so it is certainly not the end of the world. But when they signed Beltre, Michael Young said, hey, where am I going to play? Michael Young is a true hitter. He is a guy who has been the Rangers franchise, more or less, for 8 or 9 seasons. He's now the DH. He's obviously going to get many at-bats. He is going to be a guy who should be in that lineup day in and day out, and I certainly think that Ron Washington will find some time for him in that infield because he has the ability to play all 3 positions. But you look at the Rangers, I just don't see those guys moving on. You look at the rotation. They wanted to keep Cliff Lee. Who wouldn't have wanted to keep Cliff Lee? But for that matter, they have to turn over the pitching reins to Tommy Hunter, to Colby Lewis. And I don't know how deep that is going to get them. They took a lot of people by surprise last year, but I'm not so sure those guys who, they're not all rookies, but again, they don't have a lot of experience, so I'm not so sure the Rangers are going to be in the driver's seat in that division. The Angels and the A's both made some serious acquisitions over the offseason. The Seattle Mariners, tough year last year for them. They can't really go anywhere but up. So that's going to be a crazy 4-team division. I don't think the Rangers breeze through the division the way they did last year. 347-480-1724 is the number to join us on Warning Track. And then the other Final Four team from a year ago, that's the love 'em or hate 'em New York Yankees. Everybody talks about the Yankees really to the two extremes. You either are a Yankee fan or you hate the New York Yankees. They did not get Cliff Lee. They did not get Andy Pettitte. When I say they did not get Andy Pettitte, he elected to retire. And you know what? He had a standout career. I don't think the Yankees rotation is going to suffer. Of course you want a guy like Pettitte, and they certainly would have loved to have Cliff Lee. But what about CC Sabathia, folks? He's a guy who's going to take that ball every fifth day, and he indeed is going to have a good season. Hopefully, if you're a Yankee fan. Sabathia has certainly proven that he is dominant not only with the Yankees. Remember that little stint he had with the Milwaukee Brewers? They made the playoffs that year. And then, of course, with the Cleveland Indians. Matter of fact, he was teammates with Cliff Lee, and that's when the Indians were contenders. So I don't think you have to worry about CC Sabathia. A.J. Burnett, again, another one of those guys who love him or hate him. I personally think A.J. Burnett is going to rebound. He didn't have a bad season last year. He just was not a star. A.J. Burnett has been working on some mechanics supposedly in spring training. That could form a very nice lefty-righty combination, a solid 1-2 punch. A.J. Burnett, I think, mixing into that lineup, or I should say the rotation, will be fine. Phil Hughes, another guy who has come along, and he's established himself as a big league starter. A lot was made of perhaps he might have some trade value a couple years back, but Phil Hughes has proven that he is there. I can't say to stay because the Yankees will always do a lot of crazy moves, but Phil Hughes has established himself in that third slot. I think the X factor in all of this are 3 right-handers that have been all signed to minor league contracts, and if even one of those guys comes through, I think the Yankees could have a very formidable rotation. The 3 guys in question, Bartolo Colon, Freddie Gonzalez, and Mark Prior. Mark Prior, you remember him. Mark Prior was a rising star. He had some good years with the Chicago Cubs. Unfortunately, he had some arm trouble. And the Yankee brass, they're willing to take a shot on Mark Prior, hence signing him to the minor league contract. You look at a guy like Freddie Garcia who can eat up a lot of innings, and Bartolo Colon the same way. Bartolo Colon's a former 20-game winner. So if you mix one of those guys into the rotation, I certainly think that the Yankees can really be in every ball game. Of course, the offense is going to make sure that they put up enough runs. But as far as the rotation is concerned, my feeling is if one of those individuals steps up and becomes a 4th starter, that's outstanding. If they get 2 of those 3 guys to work out, I think the Yankees are on the verge of another solid season. Once again, 347-480-1724. We'll talk about the Yankee offense, and then we will send it to a break. As far as the Yankee offense, what more can you say? You look at the lineup. You look at A-Rod, who personally I think he'll break the home run record, but that's room for another episode, another debate. You look at the Yankee captain, Derek Jeter. He certainly has had a whale of a career. A lot has been focused on the offseason. Bottom line is he's a well-paid athlete. He had a down year last year, and he hit .270. For my money, and I certainly don't have the Steinbrenner money, but for my money, I'll still put Derek Jeter at shortstop any day of the week. Second baseman, Robinson Cano, had an outstanding year last year, and also on that right side of the infield, Mark Teixeira. He was hurt in the postseason. He had all offseason to rest. I think Teixeira certainly rebounds with another solid year. That's a great infield. Rodriguez, Jeter, Cano, and Teixeira. Look out, folks. The Yankees are going to put up some huge numbers. And as for the outfield, Swisher, Granderson, it's a very solid outfield. Up and down the lineup, it is very tough. So that's a quick look at the 4 teams from a year ago. The only team that I don't think will get back to the postseason is the Texas Rangers.